We need a roll call 57, I guess. Yeah, roll call 57.
Blackwell, Board, Shabbat, Sissel, Zuckerberg, Luke, and Man, Molosina, Strauss.
Through 62 is indicated, 67.
What distinguishes Charter from most other like organizations is that we run candidates and have run candidates successfully for office. Charter started off because we were at one time considered the worst governed city in the United States, and it did create what became the best governed city in the United States. And since it did that, and since it's been successful in doing that, and its legacy is more than a legacy, it still goes on, Charter is a unique political organization in the United States of America.
And Cincinnati is fairly conscious that they've had good government here, that we're known for good government. And I think they attribute it to Charter, or a lot of them do. I hope that continues. I think it gets more difficult as younger people grow up who don't remember and don't know the history of government in Cincinnati.
I'll be surprised if the party can continue. And I'm not sure that it's in the city's best interest to have three parties.
You know, people have been predicting the end of Charter for a long time. Back there in the early 60s, when Charlie Taft was the only chartered council person, people said, you know, Charter's finished. I think it has persisted as long as it has, mainly through the dedication of a group which is decreasing in number because it's getting older, and which remembers the times when this was necessary to remedy corruption. They will, of course, urge upon you the thought that they are just as necessary now as they were then, but it's a little harder to prove today.
Because that's the kind of thing that you used to have in this country, and we had a prize, believe me. We were had a machine that was the equal of, I guess, any place in the country.
Longfellow had called her the Queen of the West. But by the 1920s, Cincinnati, known for its German heritage, industries, and baseball team, was also known as the worst governed city in America. A system of bossism had been choking the Queen City for over 30 years. There were 32 elected city councilmen. But they were just mouthpieces for the real masters behind the scenes. The Republicans had a stranglehold on city politics. Only 1 or 2 Democrats were ever elected. George Cox, architect of the powerful machine, passed the organization to Rudd Heinecke in 1914. Boss Heinecke's power reached into every corner of city affairs. All public service contracts were given to Rudd's political cronies. Heinecke controlled the vote with over 10,000 jobs, payoffs for political loyalty.
They could get you jobs in the city, working for the city government. They could get you jobs working for the traction company, which had to get a franchise from the city. They could get you a job working for the gas and electric company, which had to get a franchise from the city. There were all kinds of jobs that they could arrange for you. Mm-hmm. You usually had to have the recommendation of your ward boss, the person down the line who would introduce you to the boss, and then they would make arrangements for you to get this job.
Everyone who got a job had 2% deducted from their salary to finance Heinecke's organization. They were also charged with delivering the vote by any means necessary. Criticism was considered to be unpatriotic when it was popular to be 100% American. Heineke made sure that party loyalty had its rewards.
Ward clubs had outings. They'd take the kids up to Coney Island for a weekend. It was a real social and economic, political operation. Some of those organizations had pool tables and card games conducted in them. For many people, that was a fundamental aspect of their social life. The ward bosses were careful to hand out food when somebody was hungry, to help somebody when they had got in trouble with the law, to help them find a room after they had been evicted. And it was this aspect that endeared the organization to the slum wards of the city.
The status of blacks in the Cincinnati political scene was virtually as vassals under ward chairmen. Negroes felt that they were Republicans and voted Republican blindly. And in all the wards where Negroes lived, there was a white ward leader with Negro precinct executives who did their bidding. And most of the rewards of employment went to the ward leaders. There was a definite demarcation in terms of employment opportunities. All the unions were closed. The area in which Negro workers were engaged were Pullman porter, red caps at the station, only in the most servile, laborious work.
The horror of World War I caused Americans to plunge themselves into an era renowned for gambling, gin, and dancing girls. Rudd Heineke, fattened by the profits of bossism, bought a chain of vaudeville theaters. He moved to New York, where he ran his theaters and the city of Cincinnati from his backstage office. Nicknamed the burlesque boss, Rudd telegraphed his instructions to Republican leaders. Cincinnati's tax dollars paved the road to his racetrack, while the rest of the city struggled through muddy, potholed streets. 4 of the 5 city newspapers were Republican-controlled. He continually covered himself with the mantle of patriotism and called all who opposed him un-American.
Captain Victor Heinz returned from World War I and found Cincinnati to be a sinkhole of corruption. And like Cincinnatus, the original Roman general who left the plow to go off and defend the city-state, he came back and he wanted to have our city be worthy of defending.
Heinz called together a group of prominent men to form the Cincinnatus Association. Among them were Charles P. Taft, Henry Bentley, and Murray Seasongood. These men were well-educated and idealistic, and they wanted a change.
They were appalled by conditions, political conditions in the city, and by the stories they heard coming out of the Republican organization. They were all Republicans, the wealthy, white, wealthy, middle class, citizens were Republican in Cincinnati.
Everything was wrong with the conduct of the city. We were at the lowest point. The whole city was degraded.
Many civic groups began to raise their voices in protest.
People contended that the Republican organization really built its strongest base of support in the slums, but it wasn't really doing anything to get at the root causes of the poverty and disease which they felt was rooted in the slums.
It was a period where we had lots of women being trained, both by the League of Women Voters when they got the vote, and by the Women's City Club and other organizations that were concerned with social problems primarily, health and welfare. Then there was another group that was active, the progressives. And there were people in that group, led primarily by Herbert Bigelow, of the People's Church.
Nobody could paint the Promised Land more gloriously or even more graphically than Herbert Bigelow. He was a very successful orator.
The progressives fought for social justice and wanted the poor to have a voice in city politics. They were accused of being socialists, and their leader, Reverend Herbert Bigelow, was seen as a dangerous radical. By 1923, Heineke's absentee rule had made the city a victim of disease and despair. Waste collection was sporadic and unsanitary. The Ohio-Erie Canal was a cesspool. Buildings burned to the ground before the fire department could reach them. Cincinnati, ranked third in traffic fatalities, had a corrupt police department and the second highest homicide rate in the nation. Claiming bankruptcy, the Republican Party called for higher taxes. 1 month before the election, in October 1923, Cincinnati sponsored a debate, as was the custom. Murray Seasongood took the floor.
The time has come to cut out every extra tax levy that will give that bunch a chance to squander money. Make them produce on the goods they have, or get out.
Two papers had reporters at that meeting. The Commercial Tribune the next day quoted Murray's speech and didn't even mention the name of his opponent in the debate.
The shot heard round the wards, as it came to be called, so angered Republican leaders that they made the mistake of attacking Seasongood.
If they just kept quiet and let that, there it was, and let it go out, that would have been the end of it. But instead of that, they attacked me very vigorously. The Times-Star referred to me as a Bolshevik.
For the next month, Seasongood fought back, speaking before groups all over the city. People wrote to him and telephoned to encourage the fight, and also passed him inside information. He even found support from some black ministers and community leaders.
He was the spearhead of moral indignation. People had sat around and slept and done nothing for 30 years, and he pointed out the disgrace of our city, which had become, according to Lincoln Steffens in his day, the worst governed city in the United States. And Murray Seasongood said that. He gave people a sense of outrage.
In November 1923, the tax levy was defeated, and Seasongood's victory spurred Henry Bentley into action. He began to organize a coalition of civic groups to change the system, and asked Seasongood to lead the fight.
After this thing, they said, what's the next step? They wanted to do something.
Henry Bentley would fight and die for anything he believed in.
He was the Flo Ziegfeld, the producer. He was the brains.
Bentley called on the women who had voted for the first time in 1920. Among them was Agnes Hilton.
My Aunt Agnes was founder of the Ohio League of Women Voters and also of the Cincinnati League of Women Voters. She was a militant feminist and before that a suffragette. And she was militant about improving city government.
They formed the Birdless Ballot League so that you couldn't just put a mark under the eagle or under the rooster and that would automatically vote the whole ticket. They said we want a nonpartisan ballot because basically we don't believe in parties dominating city affairs.
A progressive colleague of Reverend Bigelow's came to the Birdless balloters with an idea that would completely change the whole system.
Ed Alexander persuaded the Birdless Ballot League to broaden its sights and talk about a new city charter, not just a new election system, but a city manager type of government. So the City Charter Committee was born within the Cincinnati Association almost.
In July 1924, the Charter Committee launched a campaign to get their new city charter on the ballot. The charter called for a birdless ballot, a merit system for jobs, a 9-member city council with a city manager, and a controversial system of voting, proportional representation.
Proportional representation made it possible for different groups to be represented because it ensured representation exactly equal to the representation of the voters. If 44% of the voters were charterites, four candidates were elected.
The Republicans knew that the new charter would mean an end to their power and profits. Alarmed, they planned a counterattack. To confuse the voters, they added 2 other charters to the ballot and attacked the reformers as un-American.
When my father went to meetings, as he did many nights a week, I was frightened that he wasn't going to get home. I think it was because there was so much slander of my father in the paper.
We were met with terrific opposition all the way through, every kind of argument that could be used.
The Cincinnati Post, long the only independent newspaper, gave the Charter Committee their offices to sign people up.
It was not an easy matter to get enough signatures to launch this amendment. As I remember, we needed 20 or 30,000.
Ed Alexander organized his fellow progressives to collect the signatures. Their participation was kept secret because of the radical reputation of Reverend Bigelow. By the fall of 1924, they had enough signatures and the campaign took off.
The League of Women Voters was active in elections, particularly for issues. The League and the Women's City Club were extremely important to charter. Really, the women organized on a block-by-block, precinct-by-ward basis. The women made it possible for the men to make the decisions.
The Charter Committee debated Republicans throughout the city, led by Murray Seasongood.
Cincinnati should be run from Cincinnati, not New York. Proportional representation will divide us into racial and religious groups. I say proportional representation is the only way to guarantee representation for all.
Manager proposal is complicated, experimental, and probably futile.
A city manager will bring efficient, fair, and inexpensive government and prevent corruption.
It's time for the people to assert themselves and vote for the new charter.
On November 4th, 1924, the turnout was massive. The new city charter was voted in by a margin of 2-1, defeating the Heineke organization.
The people have spoken, changing the city's charter. Furthermore, for the first time, we will have a 9-member council and a city manager.
As they celebrated, at least one charterite was thinking of the future.
And once they got the new charter organized, Henry Bentley said, I'm going to create a political party, a disciplined political party. It will be a coalition of all these various groups, and we will get together and nominate a slate of candidates, and we'll have a ward organization. We're going to have workers at the polls. We're going to start a real political organization.
Bentley persuaded Season Good to lead a slate of independents and Democrats, and in the fall of 1925, they swept into office with 6 of the 9 seats.
One of the things they've demonstrated is that you can not only fight City Hall, but you can take it over.
The new council elected Season Good mayor and hired Colonel C.O. Sherrill to be the first city manager. In the next 10 years, with citizen support, they made Cincinnati a very modern and progressive city. The merit system eliminated corruption and graft. Proportional representation made it possible for black candidates to be elected. They set up a planning board with citizens on it and developed the Master Plan of 1926, one of the first in the country. They improved housing, parks, schools, and health services, and upgraded the police and fire departments. They built an airport and a new train station. Taxes were reduced, and Cincinnati became a very pleasant place to live.
Historically, reform movements came into being and then disappeared. The morning glories of urban politics, they've been called. But the Charter Party didn't.
Is not so selfless on Dave's part. He has
Like any other political party, it rested upon the dedicated efforts of party members. And it also persisted because it could win. And winners get to take the spoils. Charterites did not take jobs that paid money in the way that the Cox and Heineke organizations had done, but they got to help run the city in a very direct way.
I hear, number one indicates the 5 of us of a group have made the community notice the Charter Committee is very much alive and well.
So they got the psychic rewards of victory, the fun of being in the contest, the chance to be on the winning side for once, but they also got power, and that paid off, and that attracts people. So the Charterites persisted.
The Charter Committee has run candidates for over 60 years and is one of the oldest independent citizen movements in the country. Long committed to representation for all, Charter brought Cincinnati both their first black and woman mayors.
I think their primary weakness today is the fact that people do not perceive a reason for their existence.
Many people who would make excellent councilmen who have run as charterites really don't have a chance because the Charter Party is waning. It doesn't have the support nor the ability to really give the financial or other support. So I don't know that I would say they take off the cream of the crop, but I think that a lot of very able people who have run as charterites have not been elected, and it's discouraging.
I met your daughter when the radio saying all the incumbents are back here. Okay. All right. But we'll find out. Yes, ma'am.
Right. Stern 19377.
Oh, God.
Budget much of the initiatives of the minority. I voted against the 87 budget, not because it was a terrible budget, because...
Since 1924, the reform spirit has been kept alive on City Council by ordinary citizens who believe that citizenship means actively working to make the city a better place to live.
Charter is a force in Cincinnati, and all the naysaying does not naysay it.
In the words of the citizens of Athens, we will honor the sacred ideals of the city. Alone and with many, we will foster a sense of public duty. We will send forth this city greater and more beautiful than it was bequeathed to us.
Just a dream, dear, a dream come true. My every scheme, dear, depends on you. My hopes were stranded like ships at sea, but now you've handed them back to me. Can't stay like magic beneath your spell. It's really tragic the way I fell. My life's ambition, sweetheart, you're just a dream come true. Just a dream, dear, a dream come true. My every scheme, dear, depends on you. My hopes were stranded like ships at sea, but now you've handed them back to me. Can't stay like magic beneath your spell. It's really tragic the way I fell. My life's ambition, sweetheart, I found in you. You're just a dream